So on today's podcast, we have someone very special, near and dear to my heart. His name is Anthony Berryhill. Anthony is a debate coach, debate instructor. He's been in corporate America. He's had a variety of different experiences when it comes to public speaking, ironically enough. I'm going to tell a quick little story of how I met Anthony because I think it'll set the mood for this podcast, and then we'll get into some of the nitty-gritty stuff. So I met Anthony in 2017 at a summer camp. I was one of the instructors. He was one of the directors of that camp. And I think it was the first day of that camp. I was involved in something that was a leadership position, but it was something new and innovative and challenging the status quo within the same community that we were in. And due to that, on that very day, it was in California, it was a summer night, I got like a threat by somebody. It was very weird. I got a lot of threats, and I felt very nervous about what I was doing, even though I was excited about what I was doing. I was also very scared about what I was doing because it was new. It was challenging how the status quo of the community that we were in was operating. So I don't know who this man is. I know him through some mutual connections, never seen him in my life, but we just start naturally talking. Like if you see someone, you just start saying hi, start having a little small talk. And that night had been so bad for my mental health that I basically used Anthony as a therapist that night. And I just unleashed everything that was wrong, that I was scared about, that was going on in my life. And in that very moment, he said one sentence that had a couple things. One, it changed my life forever. Second, it absolutely made him a mentor that I could look up to, someone that I could call over the next couple of years and just have hour-long conversations about things that are in the same niche. And it really changed my whole perspective towards business, towards life, towards relationships, towards everything. And the one line was, the only reason you're getting threats is because people are scared of you. Basically telling me you have power now. And because you have power, you have to recognize that with that power comes backlash. And with that backlash comes a level of responsibility that you need to entail. And that one line, we had a 3-hour conversation. That one line changed my life. Wow. And it's really serious. It impacted the way I thought about everything. So thank you for that. Thank you for being on this podcast. Literally from that day for the past 2 years, it's 2019. We talked in 2017 now where we have a pretty good relationship. So you can go ahead, introduce who you are, introduce your background, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, quite a long background, and I think that statement came from that background.
Right.
I'm originally from New Orleans, but not the happy side of it, like the very dangerous side, the parts that Hurricane Katrina literally wiped away because it was so poor, so dangerous. We were looking at a school that had maybe, at the high school I was supposed to go to, lucky 30%, 40% graduation rates.
Wow.
Unbelievable amounts of violence of all forms if you will go to school. So I lived in that neighborhood my whole childhood. A program called Summer Bridge is now called the Breakthrough Collaborative through AmeriCorps. They were designed to find the schools that had the most at-risk students, but who had high potential.
Right.
So they went to my school. They said, "Who wants to do summer school?" And everyone said, "No way in hell." And I said, "I need friends. I'm getting beaten up for studying school."
Wow.
Quite literally, beaten up every day.
Wow.
They grabbed me, and we were doing summer classes where it was okay to be smart.
Right.
It was okay to study. It was okay to do those things that most students would do. But in that neighborhood, which was almost entirely African American, not cool, even with my own family. So I quite literally was life changing. And they said, "Hey, you need to go to a school where you can actually not be poor anymore.
Right.
We can actually go to college and have those opportunities." And I went to a school called Isidore Newman High School, which was the same school, coincidentally, that Eli and Peyton Manning went to.
Really? I didn't know that.
Dead serious. Like, they're both alums. If they love the Manning brothers.
And now one of them's a quarterback for the Saints.
Yeah. Well,
but no, he moved on from that a while ago.
Yeah.
He's at the Broncos now, I think.
Yes.
Maybe I'm wrong on that too. I don't know.
Yeah. So, and then during that time, I went there for middle school and high school.
Okay.
And we had a mandatory speech and debate class.
Okay.
Everyone had to do it. And
This is starting in middle school or high school? The mandatory?
Sir, I'm on 8th grade.
Okay.
8th or 9th grade.
Okay.
I think I did it in 9th grade, and I tried to avoid it but couldn't.
Right.
And the debate teacher at the time, I just did some public speaking. I was super introverted, super shy. But for some reason, speaking in front of an audience in a formal sense was very safe. because you can't be. No one can tell you to shut up. You can't get hit.
I mean, that is true. That is very true.
People have to listen to you. And then the coach said, "Hey, you should join the debate team." I said, "Are you crazy?" No.
Why'd you say, "Are you crazy"?
Because it was the last thing I imagined, right? Okay. Because even my own family, I was a guy who doesn't say much, not very outgoing, all those stereotypes. But he hounded me 8 other times because I had him the entire semester. Right. And thank God. And he said in November, and again, this is my 9th grade year, he's like, "Why don't you just go to this tournament that our school's hosting?" What I didn't know, it was like one of the 15 toughest tournaments for varsity debate. And I got my butt kicked. I actually won 1 round out of 6. But for some reason, I really love doing that. And then the rest is kind of history. I did debate all throughout high school, did it at a very national level, probably top 20 nationally. And then I went to Stanford because I had a lot of resources. Yeah, I mean, I have a crazy story. And
such a humble, and then I went to Stanford.
I did,
just that.
Went to Stanford for 4 years, did political science there, continued to coach and teach people, partly to pay, because the financial aid wasn't as great then. Right. So I needed some money to pay for books and such. But I also loved teaching, and I started started a few debate programs there. And then I had another person intervene. One professor said, "Hey, all the stuff you study from debate, you write great papers, you should be a professor." And because I love teaching and speaking, communication, I then went to another fancy school, Yale. Wow. I was doing a PhD there for 7 years. Quite a test of one's pain tolerance and mental health. For all PhDs, and continued coaching for the most part. Right. And then after that, I took a job with a financial research company where I was working with client servicing, starting their learning programs. Right. And now what I do, I guess like full circle, I run a company called Victory Briefs, which specializes in teaching high school and middle school students like very advanced level public speaking and debate skills. Right.
So it seems like debate has sort of been like a common part of your entire life. Did you ever expect after getting a PhD that you would come back to it in your mid-30s now?
Heck no. Not at all. Yes. Because I mean, I never debated in college because coaching 15 weekends a year was enough.
It took up enough time, yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't, and at the college level, it's either it's your whole life or it's not very serious.
Right, absolutely.
There's no in between like you have in high school where you can kind of pick. But I think the thing that keeps me coming back to debate is either people wanting me to help them, right, or it's one of the few places where you can actually is somewhat safe. As I was joking earlier, you can actually speak and people have to listen to you.
Right. They're paid to listen to you.
Yeah, either paid to
even
or
if they don't want to.
Yeah, or literally forced to because that's their job. And where, for all of its faults sometimes, there is a norm of whoever says the right thing or makes the best argument or explains things well that matters versus who has more power, who has more authority, who speaks the loudest.
Why does public speaking and communication, argumentation, why is that attractive to you? What pulls you to that?
Well, the first reason, it's kind of by default. Like, I'm 5'2", not the skinniest dude. I can't rap. I can't play any form of sports whatsoever, as I learned in PE class. So none of that was going to work. None of the standard things that my family would have been more happy with me doing. Right. So I had to do something. And also, I think I've always been a very intellectual person, even when I was really, really young. Right. And what made speech and debate really interesting is that it was a place where if you invest in that, it's actually taken very seriously. Right. And even when I was in corporate America for 7 years, I found a gross lack of intellectualism and mental curiosity and thoughtfulness, even with people who were like C-levels. Or CEOs or COOs or directors, you just don't find that kind of care.
Care for communication is what you're saying? Okay.
Well, all kinds of care. Care for people, care for communication, care for thinking through what you're doing. Right. And when you do debate, like those are questions that you are directly confronted
You're forced to think consciously about what you're doing.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Right. So Anthony did debate, did Stanford, did Yale, did all that, went corporate. But now he is unemployed. Well, he's technically employed, but he
Yeah.
quit his corporate job in financial services. And now you're kind of... So tell people why at this age, at 35, you decided to try to do something different.
Yeah.
Do your own thing. What was the motivation for
That's
that?
a good question. Well, I guess the answer to that, I have to start with what I thought success was. And when you
That's
go
a big topic.
Yeah. Well, when you go to schools like Stanford and Yale, they tell you success is having a 3.9, it's getting a Rhodes Scholarship, it's being the coolest guy in school,
Right.
having lots of dates and all that other stuff.
Right.
You know, and what I've learned from a lot of my mentors and people who are really close to me who've been much older in age is that a lot of that stuff doesn't count, doesn't really matter. What matters more is, have you taken risks before? Have you figured out what your limits are? Have you made an impact on other people? Have you made your own decisions? And those things are very rare for people to do. And for me, like I tried being a professor, and then my last year stopped stopped the PhD because I'm like, I don't want to be a professor. I don't want to be fighting over grades and administrator stuff and who's using the coolest philosophers. I mean, I got sick of seeing professors make students cry because they studied the wrong philosopher. Like, that's dumb to me.
Right.
And I quit the corporate job because it was about politics, not about like making money and doing good client work. Or
So it seems like the two
training.
times you quit something, it was external politics, whether it's college or corporate, that you just didn't want to deal with anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was because obviously there's a certain degree of politics. I mean, I'm a political scientist. Certain degree of politics in everything you do, you can't avoid it.
Right.
The question I think every person has to make, particularly when you think about mortality and how you're spending your life, is, whenever the nonsense is so much greater than the work,
Right.
is it worth your time? Like I could go back in corporate America and make $120,000.
Right.
But do I want to spend my time being that manager who has to lie to my employee about something to get their buy-in for a new initiative? Do I want to be that person who focuses on how I say things versus the importance and the truth of what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think in a lot of the communities that we're a part of, it could be academia, it could be school, it could be social groups, it could be your family. We spend so much time playing games, and sometimes we realize at the end of our lives, like, that we weren't really playing the games we wanted to play.
Right.
And I think that's why that theme keeps coming up, where it's like, could I be a professor? Sure, but am I doing the kind of work that when I'm 75, I can say I'm proud of? That's a different question.
How do people play the game they want to so that when they are very conscious of their mortality, maybe 75, maybe 80, if you're lucky, 90, they are happily done with the game?
Well, it's very meta.
You like that, right?
Yeah. I think, so first off, it's like there are always games. Like there's always politics. The question is like, I think the first thing you have to think about is what matters to you. And I find when I coach people, not just for debate, but just helping them get into colleges, being an admissions counselor, whatever I've done, any kind of mentorship, they're so afraid of others thinking that they're not meeting standards. They're not the best. They're not making other people happy. And then I find that when they're 30, they're asking themselves, no one cared. It's realizing.
Why do you think that happens at 30 and not 20? Like, what is...
I think...
Because that's a universal theme, seems like, for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have my own theories about this, but I think when you're a teenager, you're naturally, because of your brain, the way it works, and you're trained, like, you're always trying to get other people's approval.
Right.
And then college, you're also trying to get people's approval.
Right.
Except you're probably trying to get them approval for getting a grade or getting a date.
Exactly. Right.
And then when you're 25, I remember this myself. You're asked, why don't you have a kid? And why don't you do this kind of major? And why don't you be a lawyer? Especially with debaters, you're always told to be a lawyer. And then you never know. I've noticed in my own experience and other people's experience, no one ever asks, what do you really want to do? What is a winning, like playing a game, what do you want out of this situation? Right. It's always like people telling you, this is what you should want, but no one ever asks you what you actually do want. And I think that's half the answer to the question.
Why do you think we care about other people's opinions? Because it seems like people go on throughout their entire lives, and this is one of like the big concepts of being motivated by mortality, that you're going to die, and you're going to die with yourself, right? Like you are going to die at the end with yourself. And when you're 70 and you're old and you're thinking about why you didn't do this, why you didn't take that risk because of other people's opinions, it seems like such a silly reason not to do something. How come, and I'm guilty of this, we're all guilty of this, how come when we're consciously alive, we give such a fuck about what other people think?
Well put. I think 2 answers. I think the first reason is none of us know the right answer. So in social psychology, people will always look at others around them to see what they should do. It's like the Price is Right effect, I'd like to call it. You're trying to guess how much this item is, and then Bob Barker, I guess now Drew Carey, will say, listen to the audience.
Right.
And you're hearing all the answers. None of them know.
Right.
There's a couple people in history in The Price is Right who do know because they study other prices, but everyone else, they're just saying whatever comes to the top of their heads.
Right.
And the person upstairs will listen because they're like, I don't know what I'm talking about. The crowd is saying this one thing. They must naturally average the right answer.
It's like groupthink. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's the idea of they call it the wisdom of the crowd. But the problem is that doesn't always work for a lot of things, particularly the big life questions. Should you have children? Where should you go to school? What decisions should you make with your career? It doesn't work that well. So that's one reason. It's just we are not confident that we're right, so we look at the other people to see maybe they have more insight.
Right.
I think the second problem, the second reason people aren't this conscious about it, I think people are worried about their social reputations.
Yeah.
They're really, I mean, I've had, in a way, like being short, overweight, whatever, it's been a blessing because I've never had the opportunity to say, oh, I'm going to lose my street cred.
Right.
Like you're a debater who's African American in the hood, and you're not playing any sports. There is no street cred. So I've always had that opportunity to kind of, no matter what I'm doing.
Just not care about what they think at that point.
Yeah, because I did care most of my life, but what's they going to do? Like, I'm not shooting any free throws anytime soon. Right? I'm not going to win the popularity contest. Doesn't matter. So it's like, I've had that opportunity, but I think for a lot of people, particularly ones I coach, it's trying to get them to understand that you may not make people happy right now, but if you succeed, they'll start paying more attention. And if by then they don't pay attention, who cares what they think? But again, that is a very hard thing for someone who's 17, 27, or even 47 to pick up.
Right.
Because you don't have the security of everyone telling you that you're great and you're following all the rules.
Do you think that central to not caring about what other people think is finding something you love and going all in on that? Meaning, like most kids, as you were said, told to be a doctor, told to be a lawyer. I personally think, and this is one of my hot takes, I guess, that if you want to work at a bank, you want to make $150,000, $300,000 a year, there's 2 things you're motivated by. Either you're motivated by money or you're motivated by stability. But I really refuse to believe, and I've not seen evidence, and maybe there is a minority of people that love financial services. They love accounting, right? Like they are so passionate about a DCF statement. I don't even know if that's the right terminology, but
that is just trying to cash flow.
Cool. I learned something in finance class. So the point is, like, it just seems like those things are so arbitrary and external to who we are as a species that we all have some external motivation given our life experience, but we choose not to follow that for a variety of reasons. What do you think will help young people in particular? Because I'm 21 and I'm trying to follow the passion, but there's all these forces that stop it. Like, what helps young people get there, given your wisdom on this topic?
It's complicated because I think I'm going to challenge the question a little bit. I think the passion. I'm a big fan against passion.
Right. I think I've heard you say this.
Yeah,
before,
you've heard me rant about. I think Steve Jobs. I'm going to be controversial. I think he did a big disservice to most people
by telling people to follow their passion.
Yes, because. For a few reasons. I think part of the story of trying to gain social approval is that everyone thinks they have to do what they're passionate about. I think passion has turned into that next thing that I will mentor someone and I'm like, I see where they want to go, but because it's not sexy, right? they're not going to be able to tell other people they're doing what they love because they're doing a job that's like financial services.
Right.
Or that's like management consulting, where they have to prove that they have some skills before they get trusted to do it, what they are passionate about.
Absolutely.
They don't do those things because I'm just not excited by it. And everyone tells me you should be excited.
Right.
And that's why I want to literally and sometimes do slap them across the head. It's like, hey, if you look at people who are like Steve Jobs, they do a lot of crap they don't want to do, but
Absolutely.
they do it deliberately. But they're not doing it because it's cool or
Right.
because it's comfortable. They're doing it because they've identified for themselves what success is and what they want to get.
Right. And it's a step in the process.
Yeah, and then they grind through the discipline to get there. So I think it's a over concern about passion, but I think the second part, I guess, I'm speaking to is a lack of discipline, a lack of identifying. Like with Steve Jobs, like he wanted to design a beautiful computer. That's why he put himself through all that hell.
Right.
Right. And Zuckerberg wanted to create a network for his friends at Harvard.
Right.
But I think the way that gets translated to everyone is I'm going to go work at Facebook because it's the cool place and everyone will think I'm cool and my parents will be happy.
Right.
And they call that passion, but it doesn't really survive. That doesn't really endure once you're hitting a 16-hour day.
Right.
And that's where it really,
So for you, it's less about passion. It's more about finding a discipline. And the way you define discipline is like what you actually want to do.
Yes.
Right. Which kind of is like a passion, but it's more so like what is your end goal of what you want to get out of something. If you want to design an iPhone, you'll go through the bullshit to be able to ultimately get to that. Because that is what you want to chase. And you'll have the courage to chase that when you know what it is you want to do. A lot of people in college say it's okay if you don't know what you want to do in college, right? You can go 4 years and still be undecided, things of that nature. I kind of agree with that because I think it's hard to figure out what you want to do at 22. Do you think there's a way for people to find tangible solutions to taste what they want to do?
Absolutely. I think step one is ask yourself, this allows soul searching.
Right.
Ask yourself, what do you like and what do you hate? So I hate
Pretty
it.
simple.
Yeah. It's so simple that people don't do it.
Right.
Right. Like I know I am a person who I don't follow people's rules just because they have authority. Like I will be the person who, my bosses have told me this, like even the awesome ones are like, I need to have a reason to tell you to do something. Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's having that self-awareness to say, I hate math. I don't want to do it.
Right.
And that's okay. So do something else. Or you love math. Okay, fine. Then do something more like. So it's getting people to kind of get out of this notion that they have to be well-rounded, that they often pick up in high school, and do everything and not be weak at anything.
And that's a good point because high school, 8-9 periods a day, chemistry, but like no kid is going to come out of high school knowing every single thing they learned, nor care about everything they learned. Why do we as an education system, I guess, not try to maximize the potential of some things versus everything? Or do you think when you're that broad of a system like the United States, 300 million kids, everyone needs to be exposed to at least a little something?
Yeah, there's a lot of answers to that. I think one is this notion of this liberal arts notion of the well-rounded individual, which, as we're seeing in college admissions, is getting blown up. I'm not talking about the cheating scandal, but I'm just saying like folks are finding out that if you want to get into Yale and Stanford, you can't just be okay at everything,
Right.
and be a nice, well-obedient child.
Right.
Doesn't get you, like Stanford has a 95% reject rate. That doesn't, you're not going to get in that way. You find out, and this is all on YouTube. It's be a specialist in something, push toward it, and then see where it goes and have the boldness to fail. And I think that's probably the answer. It's do the opposite of what you're taught. So when I mentor people, I will tell them, like we talk, right? It's, you don't know what you're going to do. Pick something that you think you will like, and then when you stop liking it, shift.
Steer away.
Steer away and shift, and use the skills you learned to come up with the next thing.
Right.
And then I think that's I think that's a risk-taking life. It's a risk. It's a risk because you will often fail.
Right.
But when you fail, you're not starting from zero. You already have everything you've gotten already.
And the problem is after people fail, they can't use that failure to maximize another opportunity. Like if I'm in an accounting job, I'm making $150K, but I'm failing because I'm not fucking happy because I'm doing accounting all day. I'm self-aware to be like, I'm not happy, but I will stay there for that $150K.
Yeah.
right? It's not going to steer a path and then use this experience to move on for that.
Yeah, there's a deliberation, I would say.
Right. With yourself.
Yes, there's a deliberation and an imagination. So you have to consciously say, all right, I hate this accounting job. And you have to be willing to ask yourself the question, am I willing to take half the amount of money? Or if I'm not willing, am I willing to do the effort to find the thing that I can get $150K for?
Right.
In that next direction.
Right.
And that's where the imagination comes from. It's the willingness to say, okay, I hate accounting, but can I apply this skill in another context that's monetizable?
Right.
And a lot of folks have a lot of fear in making that jump that I think ironically keeps them from making more money.
Because they're not maximum. They're not sort of doubling down on what they're good at.
Yeah, and they're not thinking out of the metaphorical box, right? Like if I'm a first person to tell people go work 2 years in an investment bank, go work 2 years at McKinsey. But the reason you do that, and these companies, I mean, I was recruiting for them, and like I was applying for them. They'll tell you straight up, especially McKinsey. They're like, look, you're going to come here and be a badass for 2 years. You're going to work yourself to death and want to leave. And McKinsey in particular, number one consulting firm, they will say one of the best things about working here are the exit opportunities, which is really weird.
Really? I did not know that.
Oh yeah,
they will
very
pitch you based on your exit.
Yes.
Because you'll have the name of McKinsey attached to yourself.
They will say you will learn skills, you will become a good professional, and you will find alumni who have not gotten. I mean, it's funny. The people who don't get promoted are like often A- players.
Right.
But they will be the ones, and I know this from my old company because I can't say who've been my clients, but those people who don't get promoted after their first job at McKinsey will often be the new clients of McKinsey who will sign that $10 million check. Right. Because those alumni, because the alums are like, I didn't get promoted at McKinsey, but this is the reason I'm a COO at 32 years old.
Right.
It's, yeah, you failed here, but you did this thing so that you could do whatever you want later. And that's like the deliberation and imagination component, where it's being able to say, yeah, 100 hours a week in travel sucks, and I'm not excited by it.
Right.
But the fact is, when I do this, I can always do what I'm excited by later. I think if people looked at their college experiences that way,
right,
like your major or the classes you're taking, they could find new opportunities to do a lot of the stuff they want to do.
I guess I want to switch gears a little bit. What do you think about money, right? So you're in your mid-30s now. You've had a little bit of experience with money. You've made some money. Like, is money a vehicle towards success, and or is money something that can provide you a situation in which you can achieve happiness? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer on this, but what is your conception of what money has allowed you to do in your life?
Yeah, money's always been something that's been challenging for me because I've never had a ton of it. Right. Even in the corporate job, I was really, really underpaid. You
were definitely underpaid. I can attest to that. Anthony Berryhill was underpaid at whatever corporation he was at.
This is the public sphere.
Freedom of fucking speech right now.
Trying to be diplomatic. And even with the job I have now, like these short-term, I mean, I took a hit in terms of like short-term cash.
Right.
But I would argue two things. So I think you need a base level. I get very frustrated with some folks who are saying, do whatever. They'll tell someone, do anything, even if it doesn't pay. And I'm like, that's dumb. You got to pay your rent. You got to like there's a book called Scarcity that talks about this, which is if you're struggling to meet your basic needs and slightly above that,
right,
your energy is going to be gone. Like you will make worse decisions, waste money. You will kill your health. One of the reasons I didn't want to be a professor. You just can't. If you don't have enough money, it's like not having enough. So yeah. So I tell people, and this idea is very controversial.
Yeah.
Especially a lot of folks left of center of politics get very angry with me.
Right.
And they say, "How dare you tell these children of color that they should just get money?" And I'm like, because if you don't have it, you're enslaved to other people. You have to do things you don't want to do.
So you say you get backlash and criticism for telling kids of color to make money. Mm-hmm. Why do you think people criticize you for that, even if they are center of left?
Yeah, I think there's a general stickiness here. Like people don't like to hear the notion of, I'm just going to do this to make a bunch of money.
Right.
There's something to that, but I think in terms of this particular question, I think there's this norm that I hear from a lot of my students, and I tend to, as you know, I tend to work with a lot of students of color,
Right.
And I face this as one myself. You're told that you're supposed to sacrifice yourself to no end for the good of the community. That means if you don't make any, like, you should live in those neighborhoods. You should go to certain schools and not others. Like, I even used to get grief in grad school for going to Stanford and not, say, a historically black college. And that's his own story. And that happens sometimes.
Right.
And I think the reason he comes from the left is because I think there's this notion of, like, the group and, like, doing things
The
for
collective, yeah.
the collective. And there's something to that, obviously. But what I always tell people is something that a mentor of mine told me, which is if you don't take care of yourself, you're not taking care of anyone else.
Yeah, and I think with the new rise of like all the conversations about mental health, I think that's a big thing as well.
Yeah.
Which is like, I mean, one good quote I heard was like, to be selfless, you have to be selfish, right? Like no one who ever like really changed, or like not no one, but to change the world, you have to, be good with yourself. You have to, take care of who you are before you decide to do something bold and courageous. So it seems like your argument is securing the bag, making sure you have enough financial stability could allow you to go back to those communities and help them, things of that nature.
Yeah, because what are a lot of those folks missing? If it's not cash, it's resources.
Right.
It's connections, it's networks. That's what keeps them from, being able to kind of earn, like, get what they deserve.
Right.
And I think sometimes, particularly if you're left of center, we have this assumption that, like, scarcity is good, or like the struggle is good. And I'm thinking our goal is to increase mobility.
Right.
Our goal is to allow people to be who they want to be, and having money and having resources are good to that end. I think the qualifier to that statement, and I think this speaks to an earlier question, is that so often people are trying to make billions of dollars and they're working at a hedge fund or whatever, or they become a lawyer because they want more money, but they don't know why they want it.
Right. And they're doing $1 million deals for oil companies, and I think that's when the left of center has a real argument to be made.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't see that nuance.
Right.
So I have to jump in sometimes where I'm saying, like, I used to have clients who were working in private equity who were making $4 million a year, and they were the most miserable people on earth.
Yeah, I believe it. I 100%
And it
believe
drove me nuts. I'm like, I'm not even making 60. And I'm happier than you are. And I'm your therapist right now. And I got it because they're trying to, I guess it speaks to that earlier point. They're not motivated by mortality per se, because if they were, why would they care?
Why would you care about? You're not taking $4 million to the grave.
Yeah, but they care about, and I think it comes from high school and college. Like, they care about comparison.
Right.
They care about, I need to make $4 million, but that's not enough because this other person has $6 million. If I'm managing director, I'll make more, and that cycle never stops.
Right.
Which is why I think which is the answer I said earlier about you have to figure out what you want, independent of what everyone else has, and then you get to set your own rules. Versus what I think almost every person does, which is we want people to tell us the rules. But the irony is, once you follow those rules,
you're not happy.
You're still not happy. The
goalpost
is going to change.
Right.
Like, if you get the house, if you get the significant other, then you're going to have a house, and you have to have a car, and you have to have a second car, then a better car, because someone tells you need to have a better. It never stops.
So, and I guess this points to another cliche about like the journey being better than the destination. The process of happiness comes from being able to chase what you actually want to do and go through the ups and downs of that versus chase the 4 million, because 4 goes to 8 real quick. And then it doesn't, if there's no larger impact or macro level thesis to what you're trying to do, the material or external validation becomes meaningless at that point.
Yeah. And it also takes the confidence to come up with that answer outside of what anyone else thinks.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, they get halfway, but then, they're still, the answer they're given, and this is kind of speaking to the politics question, the answer they have is still programming from someone else. It's like, I want to help out in the hood because I've been told and programmed that is my first priority. I'm like, help out because you want to help out,
right.
not because it's an obligation. Because when things become obligations, they're not fun.
What do you think goes into the mindset of someone who is young or old, who wants to take a risk that will fundamentally alter the nature of their existence, meaning that everything they have known to be true changes after they make one decision? what do you think it takes for them to be able to have the courage to take that decision in spite of societal beliefs?
Yeah.
Like the actual psychology behind taking that.
Yeah, there's a lot of psychologists, like Maslow talks about, pyramid of needs.
Right.
I think that's a great one. I think the first step is you have to have the physical safety.
Right.
Which is why I'm all about getting your money. Like, just make sure you can pay your rent, make sure you have food. And I think on top of that is just the psychological needs. I think let's assume that, the physical safety and the financial safety is not an issue. I think one biggie that really stops most people is that they are so afraid of their ego dying. And by that I mean their story about who they are and what are their limitations. Mm-hmm. Let's take debate, right, which we talk about quite a bit. The biggest problem with most debaters and why they lose a lot is because they have these rules in their head for who they can be or how they can behave or what arguments they can make. In high school, this is kind of laughable, right? It's like, I want to be the cool guy and or a woman, and I want everyone to think I'm nice. But if you're debating the top 5 debater in the country, you can't be so nice. You got to be a little bit more aggressive, right? And I think that's one thing. So it's the inability to grow beyond themselves. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. I think even more dangerous is people are very attached to their senses of reality. And I'm trying not to be too philosophical, but their sense of like what are the rules you should follow? What are the assumptions you should make about jobs? So let me give one concrete example. Like when I work with people who try to get a new job,
right?
They will only apply for things that they think they fit every single line of the job description.
Right.
Or they will say, it's not my, I got in this a lot, it's not my major, so I'm just not applying. I'm like, shut up. I know the hiring director. That makes no sense anymore. Right. So it's the inability to look beyond, like it's the terror of everything I know could be wrong.
Right.
And when you think about people who are hyper successful, they destroy that notion. Like Uber, like for all their HR issues aside, they were like, the taxi model of public transportation is wrong.
Right.
We can do better. Mark Cuban, right? Like, or Kevin O'Leary, any of those people, like I think that's the sexy term for this is disruption. Right. But what is disruption really, right? It's a destruction of reality and a destruction of the way of living and being that makes us comfortable.
Right.
And I think it's when we're not willing to even risk that or even the thought of risking it, that people don't take risks that can actually succeed.
So you think the people who actually, I don't want to say change the world, because I think everyone changes the world in their own minute way, in their own communities, but the people, I guess, who've done some crazy shit, mm-hmm. do you think they've just had a personality that did not care about the consequences of disrupting the status quo?
Mostly.
And was that a reckless thing? Because Uber put a lot of taxi drivers out of business, right?
Yeah.
Now, granted, it put a lot of more people in business, but so where's the line between disruption that is irresponsible versus disruption that must happen in order for the human species to continue to evolve?
I think it's intentionality. Like, are you doing this with a goal and like a method in mind?
Right.
Right. Like, because some of the most dangerous people can be people who are very outgoing, very passionate, if you will, very excited, but they're not thinking about what they're doing.
Right.
Right, they're like, we want to. This happens a lot with startups, right? We want to change the world through our paradigm shifting app and whatever, but they're not. But they don't want to listen to feedback about data privacy, or they don't want to listen to feedback about operationally getting able to do this thing,
right.
or unintended consequences. So I think the distinction is not just intention; it's intentional. Like, are you being careful and thoughtful and thinking through what you're doing? Because even if you think about like Zuckerberg, right? Like he started small and then scaled up intelligently.
Right.
What'll often happen, you see this on Shark Tank all the time, people get just clobbered because they're going to say, we're going to completely change this industry, but we don't even have $10,000 in sales. And we don't have a plan for how you get there. That's reckless with someone else's money. So I think that's the difference. Like, are you being careful? Are you being disciplined? Are you thinking through a method? So that even if there are consequences, you've at least tried to do that work.
So thinking consciously seems to be the theme of being able to
Yeah.
effectively not even just like start a business, but like do something in life that has meaning or has purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, scenario, 4 billion years into the future.
Mm-hmm.
Our sun, the thing that is so meaningful towards us, will burn out because it is a star, just like all other stars, and stars burn
Yes.
out. So without the sun, we don't have photosynthesis. Without photosynthesis, we don't have oxygen. So that means humans, if we are here 4 billion years from now, will be gone. Did any of this matter?
Ooh. Again, the political theorist and debate coach in me would ask you, what does the word matter mean?
I don't know. It's contextual. Like, in your opinion,
Yeah.
I guess you forget 4 billion years when you die, and you don't know if there's an afterlife, right? Maybe you just rot in the dirt, ants eat you up. Did any of it matter? Even if you left a legacy in 4
Yes.
billion years, unless we colonized Mars, that legacy is probably gone.
Yeah, and you
Did it
know,
matter?
I'll make it worse for you, right? Like in big, you study big history, it's billions and billions and billions after that, the universe is gone anyway.
That's fucking crazy to think about.
Right.
Like, that's actually, like, when you take a step back from, like, just, like, you're alive on this planet and you realize, like, it's going to be, like, it's going to be gone.
The
At
whole
least
thing.
the Earth. Or, yeah, maybe the entire thing. Like,
Didn't matter.
we have facts and numbers that tell us that's going to happen. Unless there's something spiritual that will stop it. Like, if that is true, did any of this matter?
Yeah. I think the way to answer that question, the way to answer a lot of the questions we've talked about.
Right.
I'm going to borrow from philosophy. It's like I always tell my students, it's bracket reality. Like,
Bracket? Or what is bracket reality?
by bracketing means you choose a certain part and say, this is all I care about. Arbitrarily, you're like, you know what? Like philosophers will often do this. They'll say, here's my theory of justice. And you really quickly realize there's a lot of holes in it.
Yeah.
But they'll say, I can't solve for everything, but for this question, I'm helping. I mean, here's
have
the
an
answer.
answer. Right.
Mathematicians do this. They'll have those god-awful theorems that will say, if A and B and C and D and F and G, then this result. That doesn't explain the world, but in that little bracket of like a little bitty piece, you've already done something that matters.
Right.
And I think people would be better off if they were just admit that there's just some, as you said, right, there's some things I don't give an F about. Because you just can't give an F about everything.
Right.
Not everything can matter. So for me, it's like when I think about my own mortality, it's like I may have 70, 80 years here, and then after that, what am I going to do? Like have a mortality crisis and shake and
I guess like that, I mean, that's sort of my question. Like,
Yeah.
when you're 70 and you're realizing it's coming to an end, how can we grapple with, even if we've done the most amazing things in our existence, how do we grapple with that process ending? Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about,
yes,
he loves death because his argument is like nothing would be meaningful if it didn't end. Like,
Yeah.
there has to be an ending to value the meaning of it. But for me, the 21-year-old in me, I'm just like, fuck, man, like, I don't want it to end, you know? Like
Yeah.
how do we grapple with that?
yeah, and unfortunately, I've had to help like close friends of mine deal with this. I'm from New Orleans, so I have a bias here. Like, and I love the answer they give to this, which is when someone has a funeral, they party.
Really?
Literally,
I did not know that.
They
Wow.
second line. It's like they call it the jazz funeral. Like I remember when I first started at my corporate job, within months, one of my brothers died.
Wow.
And I had to go, and I was obviously torn up about it. But one of the things that made me smile, and my mom was torn up about it. But you know what she did? She's like, we're going to like parade across this street,
Wow.
dancing like my 70-something-year-old mom. And I'm like, I get it.
I never thought, that's a really interesting way to think about it. Why do you think people from New Orleans specifically?
Because they're so used to suffering,
Right.
and they're so used to kind of making their
that's
way
a good
out of
point.
things.
That's
It's
a
so
really good
in their
point.
culture. And also it's the attitude of like, I mean, the cliche goes like, if you had a good run, you had a good run.
Right.
Like if you were able, and I think it's like, if you've had a life where you've exercised freedom, you've made deliberate choices, that is so much, I mean, you can use a comparison argument.
Right.
If you're that thoughtful and you're that bold and you get your butt kicked but you still keep going, that is so much more of a life to live than most people ever live.
Right.
Like most people in their 70s, they're crying because
They have regrets.
They have regrets. They always did what people told them. They didn't really ever take any risk. Well, the person who's taken risk after risk after risk and risk can never say, I didn't really go for it. All right. It's kind of that, I mean, to make it more concrete, it's like that attitude where you're just going to keep fighting until the end. Like you're going to, like, you know you're about to lose. Like your Avengers Infinity War, I hope I'm not spoiling it. Like, you know what's going to happen.
Right.
They're going to get punked. Like, but they're going to fight until the very end of it because what else is there to do? And B, what regrets can you have if you've swung for it every single time?
So at the end, if you've been able to minimize your regrets to the nth degree, do you think a peaceful death is not just dying in your sleep, but a peaceful death is like not caring that you're going to die almost? Because there's nothing else left to do, right?
Yeah.
There was a good podcast on Joe Rogan with Kevin Smith, who was like, I think he was 47 and he had a heart attack, and the doctor's like, I think it was a heart attack. It was something, and they were like, you got to have a surgery. Do you want to talk to your wife? This was like, I think he said like a 30% chance of survival. And they put his wife on the phone, and he was like, no, I don't want to talk to her right now. And they were like, she's going to be pretty pissed. And he was like, he said something, he was like, yeah, but I'm dealing with my own shit right now. And it was hilarious because it was so peaceful, because he was just like, as much as she's going to be pissed, like, his argument was, if I hop on the phone with her and hear her crying, I'm not going to be able to make it through. So I have to like get myself mentally prepared to go into this surgery. And after he came through that experience, he survived, and he was just like, when I was laying on that potential deathbed, I asked myself what I got out of this, and I told myself I got what everybody got. I got a lifetime. I got a chance. I got to swing at the bat. And now there's unequal swings at the bat.
Yes.
Right? Like really unequal swings. But he's like, I got a chance. And he was at peace with that in and of itself. And I think sort of what you're saying is, if you can maximize that chance to some potential, there is peace with death.
Let me bring it to debate a little bit, because this is something I always deal with in coaching. It's like, when I see a student go from, I'm going to be 50% record to I'm kicking people's butts and I'm like one of the best debaters in the country, there's a shift that happens in their heads, and I know when it happens, right? Where they're so unafraid of losing.
Right. Absolutely.
And and the reason that changes their success rate is because, especially when you're trying to break into the tops, and it's not just debate, it's sports.
Anything, all right.
You got to be willing to do things that will seem absolutely insane to your opponent and to anyone else watching. For me, when I was a debater, it was like, there's so many arguments here, I'm just going to go for one thing for 4 minutes. Actually, a former New York Science debater did this to me.
Shout out to the alumni, New York Science.
No, actually, I did that to them, and they were very pissed.
Oh, really? Wow, that's hilarious.
It was my sophomore year. In poker, it's going all in. It's like the only way you're winning or staying in this tournament. It's going all in. You put in every chip you have, because anything else you automatically lose.
All right.
And I think when I see debaters are able to do that, and I'm judging, and they're like, red, but this is the one shot I got.
Right.
Then their chances to win go way up. And this is something I'm going to dare say I appreciated about Donald Trump when he ran for his election. Hated his politics, but I loved his electoral strategy and being a political scientist. Right. Where he's like, the only shot I have is a bunch of pissed off Midwesterners. That's it. Or Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Like, people were laughing at him going to Wisconsin, right? And that was one and only chance. And I'm looking at the electoral map as a former PhD. I'm like, yep, that is your own mathematical, and here we are, right? For better or for worse. Right. And I think, when people live their lives, like, the best way to become super successful or happy is to consciously and deliberately put your chips in when it makes sense.
Right. It's a good fucking way of putting it.
But what I see is that, and I talk to people, who are near death or are very old, they're like, damn it, I was so afraid of losing that person, of being embarrassed that I didn't talk to that girl.
Really? So you've had people who are near death who just explicitly say, I was afraid of what people thought, which is what?
Near death, or they're 45 and they know they will never make a certain amount of money, they will never have a career. Yeah. and they're like, I've had people in my family tell me this. They're like, all I can do is make sure my kids do more than I can because I've tapped out. And I'm like, why have you tapped out? They're like, because I only did the things that I was supposed to do as a teenager. I didn't want to, I didn't want people to make fun of me. Right. And that hit me. I'm like, oh my God, you're 45 talking like you're 85. I think, but it's the same theme, which is people are so afraid to lose because they think losing is death.
Right.
And in many cases, it's not taking risks that can cause your death a lot faster.
Regrets kill you before you die.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Because you're always saying the what if question, right?
Right.
So I guess the lesson I tell people is, don't be reckless, but be strategically risky.
Right.
Like put in the chips, particularly when you're like, I'm going to lose anyway.
Right.
Nothing pisses me off more than seeing. I mean, I'll tell you in the college admissions side, I'm going to hide information because I don't want to embarrass this person, but there's a person who really loved this one school. Mm-hmm. Like, she was a great person. They got rejected from that school. Heartbroken, crying, tears. I get it, right? And I'm like, you do know you can apply to all the other schools. And like, why should I even do that? I didn't get in my dream school. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting here, it's like, if you had applied to Stanford, I wouldn't have gotten in.
Right.
And, but I see people do that all the time. They're like, I'm going to lose anyway. And you know what I tell my debate students? Right. I literally tell my debate students, if you're going to have that attitude, concede the round.
Right.
I'm like, I did not stay up late helping you so you can walk in this room
with
act
that crappy confidence.
No, don't do it. Like, if you're going to go and get embarrassed.
Yeah.
I've actually celebrated people. I'm like, you got your butt kicked, but you put in everything you could.
Right.
And I'm like, great job. I'm so proud.
But there's going to be an element of risk taking that just makes you happy. Like going all in really makes you like it's getting into a zone that is so narrowly focused on a goal that you're willing to take the L's happily. Because I've taken a bunch of L's. Right, but if you're learning from them and if they're in the niche that you're focused on, they're gonna create a W eventually, and that eventually is what most people don't have time, ironically, to wait for.
I'll add, you don't know when the W's are coming.
Right.
A story that I haven't told many people is
The exclusive take from Anthony Berryhill.
It actually is
on Motivated by Mortality podcast.
Not about that though. I almost didn't apply to Stanford.
Why?
Because
you're getting judged too much by other people?
No. It was, I was in I knew the 30, my high school was 100 people. 28 of the 30 applying to Stanford were in the AP Calculus BC, and they were awesome. There were a lot of former debaters in that room too. And I'm like, there is no way in hell Stanford's going to take me.
You were not in the AP Calculus BC.
Oh, I was, and I had the lowest score, lowest score. And what was it? Like, we had something called the Cum Laude Society for the top 20% GPAs. I was nowhere near that. Mm-hmm. I'm like, and I have I'm this debate kid from the hood who takes 3 buses. So there's no way. It's too crazy, whatever. And the night of the Stanford application, I just was like, at one point, I'm like, okay, I have 3 hours. I'm just going to just write it really quick.
Right.
And
just see what the fuck happens.
I just speed writing, and then I had like 10 seconds to go, and I was just debating, do I hit submit or not?
Wow.
And I said no. Then I said yes. Then I said no. I get 10 seconds.
This is like 11:58-ish time.
Yeah, and the timer is on the website. This is like 2000. And I said to myself, F it. At least they'll tell me no.
So the reason you weren't willing to say F it probably a month before and submit it was you were afraid of rejection? That's what was happening? Or like you just thought you had no chance?
I just thought I had no chance.
Okay, gotcha.
It wasn't a fear of rejection because there was nothing I felt entitled to.
Right. I
mean, I applied to Harvard and got Harvard and MIT got flat rejected. And after that, I'm like, who knows where I'll end up. Right? But so with Stanford, I thought it's such a dream situation, so hard.
Right. And
I'm looking at all these. I did what. I'm just as guilty. Do what everyone else does. I'm literally looking at the 29 people whose GPAs are 3/10 higher. Right. Yeah, they don't have the crazy story, right? And I'm like, I know my competition.
Did those kids apply to Stanford as well?
Yeah.
Did any of them get in?
That's a good story too. So again, almost all of them were in this AP calculus class.
Yeah.
And just during like a 2-week period, it was like a funeral. It was like we'd find out as kids were walking in if they got rejected or accepted.
Okay.
And then 2 of them got in.
With you.
Well, I didn't know that.
Okay.
And back then, you didn't, nowadays everyone's so lucky. Like you get an email and you get to hit the button. No, they mailed that nonsense.
Yeah.
And they used to say, big envelopes means you got in. No. The big envelope, small envelope thing didn't fly either. You could get a small envelope saying you got a scholarship. And I'm like, I didn't get anything, but I'm like, whatever, don't care. And then my college counselor at my school was like, you are the last person in this school who has not heard back. You are going to call tonight.
Okay.
And I'm like, why? But sure, fine. I'll just shut you up. And I'm like, number 29, I'm number 30 out of 30. And then I call and they're like, congratulations. And this is one of the only times I've actually been like.
They call you on the phone or you call them?
I called them.
Okay.
And I'm expecting them to tell me, unfortunately. They're like, congratulations. I'm like, excuse me? What?
Wow.
There's no way in hell. And they're like, seriously, it is your name. Here's your social security number. Like, this is you. Congratulations.
And this is Stanford's admissions office.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they're like, why didn't you know? And I'm like, I don't know. And they check the package, like, oh shoot, we lost.
They didn't send you your letter.
Yeah, the letter got lost in the mail.
Wow.
That would have told me.
Wow.
So they like sent this was like getting to the point where you have to make a decision about where you're going to school.
Yeah. This is like,
so they like sent that folder as fast as they could. And then I thought about myself, I'm like, oh my God, I almost didn't apply.
So those 2 weeks, the funeral weeks, what was going through your head when you kept seeing people get rejected? You just thought you were going to be next?
Yeah, I was just like, waiting. It was like a dead man walking, just like,
wow.
I mean, I'm like, this is, just because statistically, it was a correct assumption.
Yes.
I'm, getting made fun of by the calculus teacher every day. She's like, you suck.
What did she say when you got to Stanford?
Oh, well, there was one.
I want to hear that story. Did you rub it in? Did you talk to those 26 kids who didn't make it in as well?
No. They were cool. I mean, they were bitter, but they were cool about it. So, I mean, I feel
like they probably didn't expect you to get in, right?
No, they
Or do you think they liked you a little bit?
I mean, my classmates were awesome at this
Okay,
school.
so you didn't have to rub it in.
This one teacher and I fought all the time. She didn't like debaters, and I missed a lot of school.
Yeah.
And I sucked at her hellishly harder than AP class. But when I got in, she was fighting because her attitude changed, at least for a little bit. She's like, oh, shoot.
He was like, this guy's legit.
Yeah.
It's
funny how that can work sometimes. The people who are sticking their finger in your face, when you actually get that thing, that external validation that you've been looking for, and it's coming from someone they can't reach. Like, you can't say Stanford was wrong.
Right. You can't.
Yeah.
It's like in debate, if you win all 3 judges on a 3-0, it's very hard that you definitely won, but the judges screwed you. It's like, no.
It happens, but it's hard to make that argument. Yeah. So, I think the reaction was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa.
What did that do for your confidence?
Or
did it have any impact?
It had a big impact because my parents and I fought a lot because they just didn't get what I was doing, and they were very loving and such.
When you mean doing, you mean debate?
Debate, all of it. I mean,
the intellectual sort of activities.
All of it. Okay. So I had 3 older brothers. All of them did the standard track of you go to prom, you find a girlfriend, have a kid or 2, you do some odd jobs, you stay where you are. And then I'm flying across the country, speaking fast, reading all these books that, and not playing sports. And I didn't go to prom because it was the same time it's the tournament champions. I was pissing off my parents. We were fighting every day.
Wow.
But for me, my way out of that was just like, I have to get out of the projects. I have to find a place for freedom.
Right.
And then when the Stanford thing came down, my parents, it was like, whoa, but they didn't realize how much of a whoa until they started asking their friends.
Right. Yeah, because that's when parents really like. It's crazy because all these parents nowadays, they're like they pay millions of dollars to talk to their friends. Your parents didn't seem to like get the gravity of Stanford.
Yeah, I mean, and to be fair to them, it was literally a different dimension of reality.
Right. Absolutely.
Like, we're in a neighborhood where you're lucky if, and particularly an African American male at 18 does not have a record by no fault of their own, or has graduated school, or
Right.
even the ones who did go to college, often they didn't go to schools like mine, so they would be 6 years in because they had to take remedial classes. So
Right.
that versus this dude's going to California, different reality. So I mean, my age has helped me kind of have more compassion for that, because it's quite literally it came from nowhere for them. They thought I was just going to stay in Louisiana, and I'm like, nah, I'm going to be on another plane.
And you think flying across the country every weekend, that sort of gave you the necessity to keep engaging different experiences?
Absolutely. It gave me the freedom.
Right.
Right, because my school, they paid for all the debate expenses because they knew I was super poor, and they really did everything right,
Right.
in terms of diversity and such in my case. And being able to travel, I got to see other people, and I got to see, oh, shoot, there are people who are more nerdy than me.
See other cultures, right?
Yeah, and I got to, go to summer camps. Like, one of them was at Stanford, and
Wow.
see these places. So to me, Stanford was just what you'll see on TV, right? And
Right.
it's different when you're there. But I think the gravity of that, started hitting a few days after people found out,
Right.
because they're like, "Holy shoot, this happened!" that was kind of cool.
So then Stanford, and then the 7 years of Yale,
Mm-hmm.
going through the PhD process, then going on from that.
Yeah.
So education, you would say, has always been sort of a central part of your life. Do you think that self-education has been something that you valued maybe a little bit more than formal education? Just in terms of not like you force yourself to learn stuff, but like new experiences happen that force you to learn things.
Absolutely. I think I would argue self-education has been much more important to me than formal education.
Why? Because I feel like that's just not what people think today.
Yeah. Well, because the model of education when you're in high school is you listen to teacher, you repeat.
Memorize and regurgitate.
Yeah, and even at Stanford, particularly if you're taking quantitative classes, we talk at you, then give you hellishly hard tests,
Right.
and you just figure it out. There's very little excellent teaching in general, so you end up having to teach yourself anyway. The difference with going to those kind of schools, though, is that you have a better peer base, you have more resources, financial aid. I found myself at Stanford, and the little secret about PhD programs is all self-education.
Right.
Right? I learned how to teach myself better because I had people telling me about things I would have had no exposure to. I could go to the big-ass library and read whatever I wanted.
Right.
And then I could use all that information myself. So I think if you're a good student, like you, and I always tell people this, don't rely on the school to tell you how to be happy, and don't rely on the school to educate you. Just use the school to teach yourself. Like, you're going to Stanford, apply as many grants as you can. Have them use their money to fly you abroad, have fun.
Do you think, especially
like that.
now with just like Google, do you think people undervalue self-education?
Badly, yeah.
Like if you have a question, there's a website that has 400 hours of video content uploaded every minute.
Oh,
YouTube, right? Like people are just, if I have a question, I Google it and I figure it out, right? And I feel like everyone else is, not everyone else in the world, but like people just don't take advantage of the access to information.
Partly because they don't know what it's like when you don't have it. So I was talking about the calculus class so much. One of the reasons I sucked at it was because I had no other resource.
Right.
We were using.
Couldn't go to Khan Academy or anything.
There was Google. We didn't use Google. We used Metacrawler or Alt, and you're like, what's that exactly?
Yeah.
There was no YouTube to say, here's how you do this proof.
Right.
So I was going to school when that did not exist, and now I think people don't really see. They don't have that hustle because they don't know what they're missing.
Right.
So I would say and certainly if you're a PhD, you will not survive graduate school
Right.
if you don't have that kind of hustling mindset. Because all they'll do in a comprehensive exam, like Yale, we had 3 exams. They'll hand you a sheet for one exam with 120, the names of 125 books,
Right.
and not give you any page numbers, and say you have an essay exam on these books.
Wait, really? So you've had
Yes.
125 books and they said there's going to be an exam and they say figure it out.
Yeah.
Wow. So you've had to read 125 books basically.
No, you learn to study very
You
smartly.
learn to study smartly, right?
You learn to
But
Google
still, that's a lot
and
of
YouTube.
that's a lot of work.
Yeah, and you
Self-work.
learn to be strategic, and you learn to figure out, okay, what things do I have to read a lot of, and what are things I just need to know how to reference.
Right.
You learn, you read the Stanford Encyclopedia, you look at Wikipedia, you look at secondary sources. Like, it's it's the hustle and the self-education that gets you through an exam.
Right.
Like that. And I think that's probably the best thing I learned from schools, how to hustle.
Right. How to think critically on your own.
Yeah, because when you're facing that high level of difficulty, you don't pass if you remember the basic info.
Right.
It's like my math classes at Stanford. If you just spit out, you'll get 30%.
Right.
But the other 70% is like stuff you've never seen in your life. So you have to learn that hustle, and I think that's one of the reasons that going to those elite schools was helpful, because it gave me that kind of rigor that I found that I needed when I was doing the corporate job, or that I do my current job, that a lot of people miss out on.
Cool. So we're going to conclude in a bit. I want to get a couple of tips from your expertise right now. So Anthony is currently a college admissions consultant. So he helps people figure out how to perfect their chances of getting into college, how to do well in interviews, essays. Can you give me 3, and 3 is an arbitrary number, but some tips that people can tangibly walk away with that will help increase their chances of applying to something, whether that's a college or an internship, a job, whatever it may be?
Let's say 4.
Okay.
Number 1, just get the numbers and stop.
Get the
numbers. So get a high GPA, get a high SAT. So just get it out of the way. People think, particularly when they talk about affirmative action, which is another rant, they think, I have 10 more GPA points or 30 more SAT points, I'm more qualified. That's not how schools think, and they never will think that way, ever. Because lots of reasons, like standard error.
Right.
If you're at a 750, being a 780 is not going to make the difference between you being Oprah Winfrey or some regular person.
Right.
So I will tell students, get the numbers, get a high GPA, get a high SAT, but don't go for perfection.
And for the students complaining about the validity of the numbers, you would basically say no impact, get the fucking numbers.
Just get it.
Get the numbers done.
You just don't, it gets you in the door and it allows people to read your application.
Okay.
I've gotten people in who had terrible numbers, but they have to do the next 3 steps to become a lot more painful for them.
It's like, well, strike 1.
But I'm saying it's you want to get the numbers, but don't go overboard. I've literally told parents, stop yelling at your kid about the SAT.
Right.
I will stop working with you. Because at a certain point, a few more points is not going to help.
Yeah.
Because we got to do the other things first. But you have to get the numbers, but don't obsess over them as if you're entitled to anything.
Right.
Just the baseline, get your 3.8, get your 750, and then stop. Because then the next 3 steps are how people get in. Step 2 is going to be ask yourself what you want out of college and what you don't want.
That's interesting.
That's shocking.
Very interesting.
Because everyone likes to say, I want to get in a top 10 school. And they say that in their admissions interview in front of an alumnus of Duke.
Right.
I'm like, you idiot, don't say that. And you're wondering, why don't you say that? Here's the way I would put it. It's like you're trying to go on a date with someone, and then you say to that person, I've always wanted to date someone as pretty as you. It's offensive. I'm just some object. But people say this in essays all the time. It's I want to go to Harvard because it's the best school. It's a top 10 school. And they're like, we know it's the top 10 school.
Right.
Why do you want us? Right. And I think that comes from people they're so worried about the rank, but they're not really about the experience. And they're not able to make a good argument for themselves about why they want to go there.
So if you love international relations and Harvard Schools of Government is one of the best schools for that, then that steers you in the direction of why you want that university.
That is, yeah.
Okay.
You can literally think, I don't care. But what you should say...
how you should sell it should be that
It should be specific to something you actually are about and want to do. And if you can't make that argument, you probably shouldn't go. Because I've told people, don't go to Harvard. I've told people, don't go to Stanford. I've told them to go to Stanford. It depends on what the experience you're looking for. Because what I don't want... To me, if I get you into every one of the top Ivies and you go to one where you fail, you're miserable, I've failed my job.
Right.
And schools are on alert for that. And that's even more true for graduate schools, like MBA programs and such.
Right.
Like business schools in particular, they're like, we want to know that you want what we can give you and that you can make use of what we can give you.
Right, because then when you graduate, you can talk nicely about us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They don't want pissy alumni in undergrad or grad school. So, and that would turns an okay essay into an essay that can get you into a school that you wouldn't have gotten into.
Right.
So just a hyper self-awareness and honesty. Like, what do you actually want? Like, if you don't want to be in a suburb, don't apply to certain schools. Don't want to be in a city, don't apply to certain schools. Or make the trade-offs, but do it very consciously. I think the third thing is when you're doing your activities, do what you like to do, but always increase how much visibility and output you have. Because sometimes people will be like, I like math and science. I'm like, that's fine. But who else knows that you like these things?
Right.
Have you gone for awards? Have you written papers with people? Do people know your level of interest? Like, what have you done outside the classroom? Like Stanford, and this is public knowledge, they will evaluate you by 3 criteria. Your personal traits, your academic achievement, and my favorite, intellectual vitality.
That's a thing, intellectual vitality.
That is an actual term, and that is an actual criteria.
And vital just means important, so intellectual...
The way they define it is, are you getting these A's because you're just following the rules?
Ah, okay.
Or are you actually curious and proactive and doing things that are robust and interesting?
Right, okay. Got it.
Are you that kind of person who creates your own projects, who takes risks,
Right.
who gets recognized for their work? And if you ever go to Stanford, it makes perfect sense. Because you're in the dorms and people are going to talk about the Odyssey. They're going to be excited by, they're not going to always talk about school, but they're the kind of people who are quirky and weird and risk takers, and that's the culture that school wants to have being in Silicon Valley.
Right.
So a lot of kids get rejected because they have top scores, but then they get like a low rating on the vitality part.
Right.
It's just shocking. Like, they have perfect scores and like great recommendations.
They just conformed.
They conformed. They made everyone happy. They never took that initiative to do things that were actually interesting to them. And their essays bore people. And they're like, I didn't get in. I'm like, because there was nothing to pull you.
No, I agree.
Nothing that was attractive.
I remember applying to Stanford. Now, I wish I had talked to you before I applied to Stanford. Thinking of my essay right now, I swear, I think the theme of one of the important questions was like, I want to make my mom happy. Like, I don't know if that's the most unique thing that they've ever heard before.
It can be.
It could be.
I mean, I think I say 2 rules. Either do something extraordinary or do something ordinary in an extraordinary way.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I want to make my mom happy can be made an awesome essay.
Absolutely.
I would just ask you why.
Why?
Where does
Right.
that come from? Are you doing that in a way that's very shocking or
Right.
very interesting? It could be depth of analysis and self-awareness. It's like really digging in your soul. Like, I've told Asian American parents, for example, you are not allowed to read this essay. And they're like, well, how dare you? I'm like, you're paying me. You're not allowed to read this essay because I need your child to write an essay that may scare you.
Wow.
But will make an admissions officer cry.
Wow.
Or force the committee to accept this.
And you have these discussions with parents.
Oh, I'm very radical candor. Like, I'm just like, if you want this to happen, I can't have you do what the other 95% do.
Right.
Because it's a 95% reject rate. That's 19 out of 20 people.
Right.
That means that 1 out of 20 is doing something that is extraordinary.
Right.
Like Harvard's admissions rules, they actually say it. They're like, if you want the top rating, we want extraordinary, distinctive, hard to explain. Those are not things that are conforming.
Yes. Those are not things that can be judged by your parents sometimes.
Yeah, and so it's not, so like the mom essay can be awesome. The math and science essay can be awesome, but are you doing it in an awesome way?
Right.
Like, is there a reason, think about being an admissions officer. You're reading 200 essays in a night. On your Saturday night, you have kids screaming and running around. Half of them are saying that they love The Great Gatsby. The other half is like, bore to boredom, tear to tear, you're telling me what I want to hear. Mm-hmm. But when they see an essay that makes them say, oh my God, this is a human being I want to talk to. I want them on my campus and I want to talk to them.
Wow. That's a good way to think. This is phenomenal advice. Like, I actually, this was not told to me when I was applying to colleges.
Darn sure it wasn't.
Okay. So.
Let me give a quick story. It's,
okay.
So my college application essay was, I didn't realize, it was sort of dramatic. It was like, it played on this theme of like, I live in two different worlds defined by race, a black world and a white world. And Saving Private Ryan was a movie that came out, this military movie. Right. And my theme was called like Saving Private Berryhill. And I was just writing about how I was a soldier in a war that has, because New Orleans is hyper segregated.
Right.
I'm literally taking the bus from the projects to this super fancy school, and then have to go back, and I don't fit in either world.
Wow.
And there's all this violence that's happening around me, right?
Damn.
I read this essay, and I was so numb to it. I'm just like, this is just my life, whatever.
Right.
And my college counselor, he calls me in his office. I'm like, I'm in trouble? He's like, that essay you wrote, and he's like, you submitted it to Washington University. I'm like, yeah. He's like, it was entirely true, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah, because they called my office, and the admissions officer, not only was she crying, but the entire committee cried.
Wow.
And he's like, I think you're getting in. And by the way, this other school called me telling me the same thing.
Wow.
And I didn't, because to me, I'm like, why you
that's just my life.
and then like, ish happened and whatever. But when I read the essay back, I'm like, there was a hyper honesty.
Right.
This is what it is.
A hyper sense of self-awareness. Of
Yeah, like,
yeah.
It's like I'm taking this experience and I'm putting it in a larger motif or context. It's a standard story of I don't belong anywhere. But if you're trying to do it in a more honest, authentic, but creative way, it could be awesome. So if you're in a math and science, but you argue how your math and science makes you more philosophical, that could get you in, because that's intellectual vitality. That's showing that you're not the kind of student who just repeats back things, but you're processing and thinking and being imaginative, so that you're going to be the next you're going to be that student that a professor's going to say, we're going to write a published book together, or we're going to do a paper together, or we're going to create a nonprofit together. And I think that's what a lot of the top schools are looking for. They want people who have good grades, but who also, they want the next, they want the best African American student. They want the best athlete, the best writer, because you'll find out when you go to college, like almost every school will do the version of we have people who've gone to all 50 states, and we have a gold medalist, right, and we have 50 different languages. Like, imagine what can you add to that speech,
right,
so that the director of admissions can justify his job or her job, or the mom with 3 kids who's on the committee is going to want to bake. I'm not kidding. A container full of cookies to the committee to make sure that they get you in.
Right.
Like, you can convince them. Like, that's how you should think about even when you're applying to jobs. Like, how can I tell a story that's going to connect with you as a human being, so that you care about me, and that when people are yelling at you, that you're going to fight back.
Right.
If you think of it that way, then your whole understanding of admissions or yourself changes. Because you're not just saying, what do I want? I deserve everything, to what can I give you to give me what I want?
And do you think then if you get rejected after you like sort of told your truth, you can live with it a little bit more? Right.
Yeah, because you can honestly say, this is not going to be a good fit. I don't want to be there anyway.
Right.
But what happens almost all the time is that people, they try to say what colleges want. It's boring. It's right, painful. They're like, oh God, not another one of these. And then you think, you're like, but I did everything my mom and my dad told me to say in my essay. And like, that's why you got rejected. Right. They can tell. And I've read enough college application essays where I've told people start over. Like, literally, start over.
You would have told that to me when I was man, I wish I taught, like, my essays were so basic now that I think about it, even though I know I have an interesting story to tell. And I've discovered that after I've been through college and sort of explored my own introspective experiences. Yeah. Wow.
I'll give you one more tip. As I said, I would give you 4.
So number 1 was grades. Number 2 was ask yourself why you want to go to that college. Number 3 was market your story correctly in terms of essays. Yes. Number 4
is, I'm going to steal this from Cal Newport, who wrote a book called How to Be a High School Superstar. Okay. He also wrote another book. I love his work. And it's like, have a grand project, have a big thing, which is, I think, fits what you're doing and what a lot of people listening to this are doing. It's an extension of the other ones, but it's like, do something that will scare you, but that you want to have done.
Right.
You doing this podcast is a good example of this, right?
I have no idea what I'm doing. For 20 minutes, we couldn't even set up the microphones correctly, so yeah.
And, so for me, that was like, I just did a set of things that I just like to do.
Right.
Like we didn't talk about this. I was on the computer programming team.
You did a lot of shit in high school.
Yeah, I did.
Man.
I needed money, so I did every essay contest I could. I paid for a lot of sneakers and video games, and ones that I thought I had no chance at. And I did everything I like to do, but I did it as hard as I could. Mm-hmm. I'm like, if I have no chance, I have no chance. What I've seen other people do is like they'll start clubs at real clubs that will exist after they're gone.
Right.
They won't just do community service, but they'll do a project at such a scale that the whole city knows about it. Like I remember this one kid who, not only was he an Eagle Scout, but he had like 200. There was a letter that said he had 200 people at his ceremony because he did so much for the community that everyone wanted to be there. And I'm like, yeah, that's what you want to do. Right. That's the kind of impact you want to make. And I think the best thing too is like when you have a big project and you fail miserably, what people don't know is that people love to hear those stories.
Yeah,
love it. Like,
and it's like we love the underdog, rags to riches.
Mm-hmm. That's how you get a job. It's like, oh, I failed miserably trying to do this big ass thing, and they're like, oh wow, you actually
fucking tried, right?
And you were actually able to do that and do that and do that, and you know what it's like to fail. Like, those stories are powerful interview stories for any level of schooling or jobs. And people are they're so afraid of vulnerability. Yeah.
I didn't mean to look. I just like
that was well timed.
As soon as you said it, I was like, yeah.
but you can't even get there if you don't do anything big.
Right.
Right. Or you do things that you think you only do the things you think you can do. And I'm the one saying, email that celebrity. You tell everyone who's helping you with your application. You tell your teachers that are writing like a letter of recommendation. And then they'll back up what you're saying.
Right.
You're actually going to make their lives easier because the worst thing is try to write something for someone where you don't have the thesis.
Right.
And I will say, tangibly, if you can, do this 2 years out.
2 years out, like, before you apply.
Yeah, like, if you have the time, like, if you're a sophomore, start thinking, like, what do I really want to do, and just go hard on it. Like, do all the APs that are in that thing.
Right.
Don't do the APs you hate or that you'll fail. Do the, get published. Do contests. Do writing contests. Do speaking contests. Anything that can get you visibility from someone else that validates the effort you're doing
will prove the bigger purpose of what you're trying to get
to.
So
even if it's really small, right? If someone else says, this is serious, here's a newspaper article.
Right.
Or here's a medal I got. Or a teacher says, this is some of the most serious work on an example about snow crabs.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It's about snow crabs. I'm sitting from Count Newport.
Right.
It's the fact that you're able to get high impact on even a small thing that demonstrates to someone else. Like, not only, because think about what that demonstrates to you're an admissions officer. What are you worried about? You're worried if the person's stable. You're worried if they're going to be a threat. You're going to be worried about, can they handle the work? You're going to be worried about, will the professors even want to work with this person?
Right.
But if you can say, you know what, this itty-bitty thing, I am the expert at that, and I've put in focused effort, and I've taken the classes, I've had that direction, what that would tell someone is, okay, this person's really serious.
Right.
It wipes out a lot of questions. And it makes it easier for that person to then go to an admissions committee and say, this guy is the guy who did a philosophical analysis of football that a professor actually thought was good.
Right. A college professor. Right.
And then
have a macro level purpose, and even if you do something that is micro level, if it has a connection to the overall purpose, there's a broader chance of it having meaning in your application.
Yeah, you don't have to do any one thing. Just do it well and make it like authentic to you, and make sure other people know about it. That's probably the summary of my advice.
This advice is gold. I had a news article written about me, and I didn't put it in my college application. As soon as you said it, I was like, why didn't I put that in? It's amazing. Okay, so thank you for being the second guest on the podcast. We're going to conclude with me getting a Sharpie so that we can sign this poster.
Happy to.
So, Anthony Berryhill, thank you so much for supporting the podcast. Put it anywhere you like.
I'm honored to be
Your
the first.
signature.
So it's my name?
Just your name. All right, we're done. We're out.